Hello and welcome to The World This Week. I'm Beverly O'Connor. Coming up, Donald Trump tests positive to COVID-19 just days after a fiery first presidential debate. Casualties mount after fighting erupts in a territorial dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan. And mining giant Rio Tinto accused of causing environmental damage and human rights violations in Bougainville. Well, just days after what's been described as the worst American presidential debate in living memory, President Donald Trump and his wife Melania tested positive to COVID-19. He had mocked his challenger Joe Biden for wearing a mask ahead of the 90-minute clash in their first face-to-face exchange of the campaign. With the best and the worst of the debate, here's our Washington correspondent David Lipson.
Guy, the wrong night at the wrong
More rabble than debate. From the outset, a president trying to get under the challenger's skin.
Please let him speak, Mr.
Number
President.
two.
You just lost the left.
Number two.
You just lost the left.
Wait a minute. You get the final word, Mr.
Well, it's hard to get any word in with this clown.
Before long, Joe Biden was being dragged into the mud.
Will you shut up, man?
Listen.
Keep yapping, man.
Did you use the word smart? You graduated either the lowest or almost the lowest in your class. Don't ever use the word smart with me.
You're the worst president America has ever had.
Hey,
Come
Joe,
on.
We have ended that segment.
The moderator repeatedly tried to regain control.
I think that the country would be better served if we allowed both people to speak with fewer interruptions. I'm appealing to you, sir, to do that.
Well, and him too.
Well, frankly, you've been doing more interrupting
Well, that's
than
all
he
right,
has.
but he does plenty.
Well, less than, sir, less
there's
than...
plenty.
No, less than you have.
With more than 200,000 Americans dead, COVID-19 was one of the few issues that brought them to heel.
Between 750 and 1,000 people a day are dying. When he was presented with that number, he said, it is what it is. Well, it is what it is because you are who you are.
We got the gowns, we got the masks, we made the ventilators. You wouldn't have made ventilators, and now we're weeks away from a vaccine. We're doing therapeutics already. Fewer people are dying when they get sick, kill people.
On everything from healthcare to Supreme Court judges, there was mostly noise.
This guy will close down the whole country.
On law and order, they both sidestepped questions. Joe Biden on whether he'd urged Democratic mayors and governors to crack down on violent protests.
I don't hold public office now. I am a former vice president.
And Donald Trump when asked to condemn white supremacists involved in clashes.
Who would you like me to condemn?
White supremacists and right
Proud
militia.
Boys, stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what, somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a right-wing problem.
His
This
own
is a left-wing.
FBI director
This
said
is a left-wing problem.
white supremacists. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you gotta be
not
kidding.
militia.
The challenger's final message was delivered straight to camera.
If we get the votes, it's going to be all over. He's going to go. He can't stay in power. It won't happen. It won't happen. So vote.
While the president set out to discredit the election itself.
In a Democrat area, they sent out 1,000 ballots. Everybody got 2 ballots. This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen.
Well, what a mess. A president who's behind in this race, trying to steamroll and bully his way to a second term, and a challenger who's proved he is easy to provoke and can be sent off course. Joe Biden struggled to get his message out tonight, but he's not the one who needs a campaign reset. Donald Trump threw everything he has at the challenger, insults, interruptions, smears, in the hope the 77-year-old would drop his bundle. Well, he didn't. Joe Biden was wrong-footed at times, but at the end of the night, he was still standing, and that's not bad when you're well in front. With 2 presidential debates to go, it doesn't appear Donald Trump has done what he needs to do to turn this race around. But he has again claimed, without much evidence, that this election will be rigged, and he's prepared to fight a result if he loses.
Well, dozens of people have been killed after a territorial dispute between Armenia and Azerbaijan erupted into the worst fighting in years. The region is a corridor for oil and gas pipelines, and both sides are warning of war. Here's our Europe correspondent, Samantha Hawley.
Homes are being shelled and civilians are bearing the brunt of this battle. While the military attack new fronts in one of the world's oldest conflicts, both Azerbaijan and Armenia say this is war.
The Azerbaijani army is shelling and striking the enemy's military positions. We are standing on the brink of a large-scale war which could threaten international security and stability.
The former Soviet republics blame each other for firing the first shots. It's the latest flare-up over Nagorno-Karabakh, a breakaway region that's inside Azerbaijan but is run by ethnic Armenians. It became a separatist enclave in a war that broke out as the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991. Russia and Turkey are backing different sides in this conflict. In the 1990s, 30,000 people died in the fighting and over 1 million were displaced. Armenia has declared martial law and called up all men to fight. The reservists have answered the call by their president to defend what he calls their sacred homeland, but they're facing Azerbaijani troops whose president says he's confident of regaining control of the region. A lot is at stake. This is also a corridor for transporting oil and gas. And if it escalates, a lot more lives could be lost. Samantha Hawley, ABC News.
Rio Tinto has been accused of causing environmental damage and human rights violations in Bougainville. The Human Rights Law Centre has lodged a complaint with the Australian government over the mining giant's now abandoned operations in the region. It comes as the miner continues to face backlash over the destruction of ancient rock shelters in Western Australia. Here's our PNG correspondent Natalie Whiting.
For more than 30 years, the massive Panguna gold and copper mine has sat abandoned. Rio Tinto was forced to abruptly shut it in 1989 after violence broke out, sparking a nearly decade-long civil war in Bougainville. The fighting is now long gone, but locals say the mine waste remains and is causing damage.
Community believes that this destruction is going to continue on and eventually it will make the community here completely landless.
Landowner and newly elected MP Theonilla Roka-Matbob has been working with the Human Rights Law Centre to try to hold Rio Tinto accountable. They claim bathing in the polluted water has led to skin diseases, diarrhoea, respiratory problems and pregnancy complications. The Human Rights Law Centre has filed a complaint with the Australian government on behalf of more than 150 Bougainvilleans, using a little-known mechanism that can investigate if companies working overseas are complying with standards set by the OECD. The centre hasn't ruled out also taking legal action.
In light of what's gone on here in Australia with the Rio Tinto's destruction of Juukan Gorge and the company's recent commitments to sort of learning lessons from that, we're hoping that in light of that they will look seriously at these problems.
Rio Tinto handed its stake in the mine to the PNG and Bougainville governments 4 years ago. But the company says it is ready to enter into discussions with communities who have filed the complaint. Natalie Whiting, ABC News.
There's been a public outcry in India after a woman's death almost 2 weeks ago after a brutal gang rape. 4 men have been arrested and there's also outrage towards local police who allegedly cremated the victim's body without the family's blessing. Our South Asia correspondent James Oaten.
The 19-year-old woman from a small village in Uttar Pradesh had been cutting grass when she was attacked. Police say she was raped and tortured. Her injuries so severe, she was left paralysed and struggling to breathe. She died this week in a Delhi hospital. News of the woman's death sparked outrage outside the hospital. The victim was a Dalit, the lowest rung in the Hindu caste system. Activists argue people belonging to that caste continue to face widespread discrimination, particularly in Uttar Pradesh. Police have arrested 4 men, but there was further outrage this week after news broke officers cremated the victim's body in the early hours of the morning. The distraught family say they never gave their blessing.
I want my daughter's body to be brought home. I want to apply turmeric to her body as per our Hindu tradition. I want to give her a last farewell.
There's something very fishy about it. So never in my history of working I have ever seen where the body was not given to the family. There is no reason they should not give the family.
Earlier this year, 4 men were hanged over the 2012 gang rape and murder of a 23-year-old student. Many are now arguing those responsible for the latest attack should also be hanged.
Northern California's wine country has been hit with fire again, destroying homes and forcing the evacuation of 50,000 people. Here's our chief foreign correspondent, Philip Williams.
Once again, the hot winds propel the fires from the forests into populated areas, taking everything. Families' hard work, their dreams consumed by an insatiable monster. With firefighters stretched to breaking point, locals did what they could.
I was just driving by and I literally just looked to my left and saw it burning. And then all of a sudden we rushed to the firefighters to try to, tell them to put it out. But it seems like they got enough on their hands already, so wanted to step in and, put out the fire.
Thousands heeded the call to evacuate, but for many it was an anxious wait, wondering if their homes still existed.
It was a scary night. It was crazy for sure.
But Dominic Wiggins' neighbour was not one of the lucky ones.
I feel so bad for them. I can imagine how they feel.
Small fires merged into larger ones. The Napa Valley is famous for its wineries, but there's nothing to salvage here at what was a cellar door. Those that ignored the evacuation order were on their own.
We have a civilian entrapment that resources can't get to.
We don't have time to go back in to help rescue somebody that decided not to leave, because now you're endangering the firefighters or law enforcement to have to go back to make rescues.
These latest blazes come on top of what's been California's worst fire season ever. And this is nowhere near the end to what's already been a horror year.
So this is just like, okay, on top of everything else, now you have to start doing this.
For thousands, there is no battle left to fight. Their precious homes, businesses, schools, communities, stolen by the heat, the dry, the wind, and just a single spark. Philip Williams, ABC News, Washington.
In the UK, researchers have found the majority of coronavirus patients suffer debilitating symptoms for months after contracting the disease. The condition has become widely known as long COVID, and it's affecting the young as well as the old. Here's Europe correspondent Samantha Hawley.
This was the moment nurse Sue Snelson left intensive care after surviving coronavirus.
I think a lot of people don't realise just how debilitating it is and that, some of the symptoms will be forever.
The 64-year-old may be out of hospital, but she's still not well.
I still get very short of breath at times. Going up a steep slope or upstairs is still difficult. And if I talk too much without a break, I start to get short of breath.
Amy Durant was never hospitalised, but 6 months after contracting COVID-19, she's struggling to cope.
It's just like constant tiredness. It's a weird feeling where as soon as I wake up, I'm just tired and it never really goes away.
Mother of 3, Claire Hasty, used to ride 20 kilometres a day to and from work. Now she says she can barely walk 20 metres.
Over time, I had a lot of heart pain and palpitations. I got neurological symptoms as well, feeling a real pressure in my head, pronounced pins and needles around my body.
Frustrated by a lack of help or acknowledgement, Claire set up a long COVID support group, now has 22,000 members.
Some people also have debilitating headaches. Some people have lost their sight, some people have become incontinent. You name it, it can be a symptom.
After studying more than 100 hospital patients, British researchers found lingering symptoms were actually more common than making a full recovery.
The most striking was the fact that a quarter of patients had recovered completely, but 3/4 of the people we spoke to were still experiencing ongoing symptoms.
Proving long COVID is a condition with devastating consequences for tens of thousands of people is one thing. Understanding the cause and developing treatments is quite another. And scientists admit they have a long way to go yet.
So I'd like to say that we'll be able to give some answers, but I don't think we'll be able to tie it all up in a nice bundle.
Like, doctors can give opinions, but they have no idea how long it's going to go on for or if we'll ever recover.
Sue's now back at work, but for others, it's still not an option. Samantha Hawley, ABC News, London.
Relations with Australia's biggest trading partner, China, are at their lowest point in decades. For months, DFAT's official advice has warned that Australians living in China may be at risk of arbitrary detention. Michael Vincent spoke to several Australians still living there.
I'm a walker. My daily step average will be shocked to hear is 33,000 steps a day.
After 20 years of living and doing business in China, these are uncertain times for Australian businessman Peter Arkell.
I think every time an Australian has a difficulty with the authorities here, I really do get worried about it. I feel very sad.
Good morning from Shanghai. There's been a little...
Peter's old friend Michael Smith was a long-serving China correspondent for the Australian Financial Review. But at the beginning of September, he and ABC colleague Bill Birtles were forced to flee the country because they no longer felt safe.
I do know Mike Smith very well, and I was really worried when I got the phone call to say that Mike had to leave the country. I know Chunlei, and I feel really sad that she is still being detained.
Australian journalist Chung Lei was detained by Chinese security authorities without explanation weeks earlier. Despite his fears for her, Peter says he's not feeling directly under threat.
As an Australian, I can, as a foreigner living here, I can move around China very freely. There are no restrictions whatsoever.
I feel for the journalists. I also have not had the opportunity to talk to them directly, so I don't know what the situation is.
Former actor turned TV host Heidi Dugan moved to China from Brisbane 24 years ago.
Hi, my name's Heidi. My name's Heidi. Heidi. 感觉怎么样？第一天上学。
She's become a star on Chinese state media. Currently back in Australia visiting family, she still sees her future in China.
Personal safety, I've always felt incredibly safe in Shanghai. That has never been something that I've been worried about. I can't do anything about what the government's, they will do what they will do, but for me, it's the most important thing is to try and bridge that gap and to help understanding between two cultures.
It's a sentiment shared by Matthew McKenzie, a businessman who lived in Shanghai for 5 years.
I live here with my family and I'm very happy to be here. I feel very safe and welcome and have had no problem having my family here at all.
Matthew says he has no concerns about staying.
Look, I guess with the recent friction between Australia and China, I've had a few people contact me and ask me if things are okay, and I've assured them that on the ground for people like myself, that we follow the rules, we're good citizens, we do the right thing. We have nothing to worry about, in my opinion.
It's not the first time Australians have been detained by Chinese authorities.
Australian consular officials in Shanghai have finally been able to meet the Rio Tinto executive arrested for spying. And more details.
Rio Tinto, when they had difficulties in 2009 and they had staff detained, instead of going back in their shell and becoming almost invisible here, they took a very front foot approach. They said, we've got nothing to hide. We are an open business. We know that China is an important market, and we're engaged.
Pre-COVID, there were an estimated 30,000 long-term Australian residents in China. It's not clear how many remain, in spite of DFAT's warning to leave.
I've not thought about leaving. What would make me leave, if I really challenge myself on that, would be a further escalation, perhaps if there was military conflict, but I really don't see it coming to that.
I try to live as a good citizen in China. And sometimes the rules will be different to what I've understood to be the rules of a society. But this is a different society, and it's based on a long, long history.
And one of those points of contention between China and Australia and many other nations is Beijing's claim to a large part of the South China Sea. NEWSThe takes a look at the dispute and China's diplomatic push into the Pacific.
The world is no stranger to China flexing its military muscle, but even when it's a simulation, the impact still resonates. This video, released by China's Air Force, shows a nuclear-capable bomber attacking what appears to be Andersen Air Force Base on the US Pacific island of Guam. A battle for influential supremacy has been brewing in the region for some time, that's occasionally been equally explosive. Back in 2016, an international tribunal ruled that Beijing did not have the right to claim this 4,000-kilometre stretch of water between China and Indonesia as its own sovereign territory. In fact, 6 other governments consider the South China Sea part of their own exclusive economic zones. But that didn't stop China from turning what was once a bunch of atolls, sandbars and rock formations into a series of military bases, where they claimed shipping routes, fishing areas and a lot of oil and mineral reserves below. Since then, the US has introduced a myriad of sanctions against China and stepped up its military presence in the region. Both have seriously irked Beijing, and many ASEAN members have become so sick of being bullied by China, they're threatening to draw Washington even deeper into their local disputes. But China has also capitalised on the situation in the Pacific, a region ravaged by climate change, poor economic growth and now a pandemic. For decades, Australia has been its biggest aid donor, but more recently, China has become a major player by funding large-scale infrastructure projects, including a $120 million road upgrade in Papua New Guinea. The United States has dismissed these moves as payday loan diplomacy, where countries take on unsustainable debt in exchange for political leverage. Last year, the Solomon Islands and Kiribati severed long-standing ties with Taiwan. In the same week, Beijing had promised them unprecedented development opportunities. Now, there are fears this could all lead to another South China Sea situation much closer to home, with a heavier Chinese presence in the Pacific, creating a range of issues for Australia, the United States and its allies. This far into 2020, just about anything seems possible.
Well, US President Donald Trump looks set to appoint his 3rd justice to the Supreme Court, naming his pick to replace Liberal icon Ruth Bader Ginsburg. As expected, he's named a deeply conservative jurist whose confirmation looks all but certain. Republicans are pushing for a lightning-fast confirmation to cement an ideological majority on the court that could long outlast Mr. Trump's presidency.
Some presidents didn't get to nominate a single Supreme Court judge. Amy Coney Barrett is President Trump's 3rd.
She is a woman of unparalleled achievement, towering intellect, sterling credentials, and unyielding loyalty to the Constitution, Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
The staunchly conservative judge has already had a stellar legal career and reassured the nation her job is strictly about the law.
If confirmed, I would not assume that role for the sake of those in my own circle, and certainly not for my own sake.
But supporters of the woman she replaces, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, worry her deeply held religious convictions will colour her judgments, something Amy Coney Barrett has previously denied.
I see no conflict between having a sincerely held faith and duties as a judge.
Outside the Supreme Court, some supporters were hoping her faith will guide her when it comes to decisions on abortion.
She's a great judge. She'll really do right by us. There's a couple of things that are very important. One, she's pro-life. I know that she doesn't say that, but we know she is.
But others fear a court dominated 6-3 by Conservatives will mean an end to health care for more than 20 million Americans.
I'm really worried that if she's rushed under the court and gets to decide that case, lives could be lost.
But first, this mother of 7 children must face a Senate hearing, something the President wants done ASAP.
But it's going to go fast. We're looking to do it before the election.
Congratulations, Amy.
Outnumbered in the Senate, there's not much the Democrats can do to stop the nomination.
Just about everything that America believes in and stands for when it comes to issues like health care and labor rights and LGBTQ rights and women's rights. Judge Barrett stands against all of that.
For all the controversy, if she is approved, her appointment will help shape the fabric of this nation socially and legally for perhaps decades to come. Philip Williams, ABC News, Washington.
Well, before the coronavirus